This evening, I want to talk about the progress that we have made.
Today, the truth has come out.
This hasn't always been easy.
Markets spiked yesterday.
2 parents working 2 jobs full-time. I haven't got 2 pennies to rub together at the end of the week.
Does he think it's worth it, and will he apologise?
When you've got a home to run and a child to feed.
They planned to do this all along.
And I'm not going to go into the detail.
Everyone's a couple of pay slips away from being that person who's struggling.
Flatlining wages, rising debt, 200,000 increase in pensioner poverty and...
Okay, so the UK government has officially run out of money. That's at least according to this OBR report that says Britain's fiscal headroom, which is a fancy way of saying spare cash, has vanished, flipping from a £10 billion cushion back in March to a gaping black hole in the public finances. Government spending managed to hit £1.23 trillion last year, which is about £40 billion more than they forecasted. So in other words, we're f***ed. It's not that bad. It is. We're basically out of money. And with public debt now approaching 100% of GDP, the highest since the 60s, this report is flashing red, warning the government that there's virtually no room for manoeuvre unless the Chancellor raises taxes or cuts spending. Which means one thing: Rachel Reeves is gearing up for the biggest tax raid in modern British history, and our wallets are in the firing line.
In this budget in November, what we are going to get is probably a tax raid on the middle class and the upper middle class.
And Gary's right. We should expect a tax raid on working middle class families. And some people are already panicking. Pension savers, scared that Reeves is gunning for their retirement pots, have withdrawn more than £18 billion in the last year. That's up 60%.
Working people will not see higher taxes in their pay slips as a result of the choices that I am making today.
I don't believe it's fair to raise taxes on working people. So let me spell it out. We will not raise national insurance. We will not raise VAT.
Okay, that promise to not raise taxes on working people is the reason why we're in this mess. Because without breaking their pledge, Reeves can't touch income tax or VAT, so instead she has to be sneaky. That means stealth raids. So I'm talking freezing tax thresholds so our pay rises vanish, or cutting back pension relief so our savings shrink, or even scrapping fuel duty free so every time we go to the petrol station it costs us more. But in the words of Lance Corporal Jones,
Don't panic! Don't panic!
So I've gone and pulled together the potential policies based on the rumours, the speculation in the papers like the Mail, the Telegraph, the Guardian, and also looked at analysis from the IFS and OBR, which is, by the way, incredibly boring. Like, if you're having any problem sleeping, just print out an OBR report and read it. Basically, though, I've gathered together the policies that I think Reeves might implement in this month's budget. At the end of the video, I've also included some tips that I hope will help make it as pain-free as possible for you. But honestly, it is a little bit limited. We are with our backs against the wall with this one, and we can only try to do whatever we can to protect our wealth and our families. It's that bad, isn't it? I'm talking about protecting my family from the Chancellor. Jesus. But first, I want to share a scary statistic with you. If the autumn budget goes the way insiders expect, a single earner family with 2 kids on roughly £65,000 could be down an extra £232 every single month. That's almost £3,000 in additional taxes. And not since the end of the Second World War has the UK had a higher tax burden. And what I mean by that is the share of the whole economy that the government takes in tax. So for every £1 the UK produces, nearly 38p goes straight to the Treasury. And the last time it was this high was 1948, when Britain had just been bombed. We were paying off massive war debts, rebuilding our cities, and going under major social reconstruction. I'm talking launching the NHS. I'm talking free secondary education and expanding social security. Back then, people could actually see where their money was going. Today, well, you couldn't see it if it smacked you round the face. Definitely not in the roads or the schools. Yet the tax burden keeps climbing while the country literally crumbles. And let's be clear. This mess isn't just down to the economy or COVID or Ukraine. It's years of political mismanagement built on stupid budgeting and wishful thinking. Politicians have been making decisions based on expected growth that never happened and a fantasy that borrowing would stay cheap forever. The IFS actually came up with a name for this and called it fiscal fiction. Well, now that fiction has finally caught up with reality in the form of a £40 billion black hole that Reeves and Labour have to fill, and the first place they're going to look is our paychecks. So just imagine your salary is on an escalator, slowly rising over time, and the impending higher tax bracket is like a robotic arm on the wall just waiting to grab 40% of every extra pound you earn. Normally that arm would just move up a bit each year just to match inflation, but the government, being their conniving, sneaky selves, froze it. So as inflation pushes your wages higher, your escalator speeds up, and suddenly you're paying higher rate tax, not because you're richer in real terms, but because the system stood still. That's fiscal drag. It'll come up a lot in this video. It's invisible, it's sneaky, and it's one of the easiest ways for Reeves to pull billions from our wallets without ever changing the headline tax rate. So take someone earning 50k. With thresholds frozen since 2021, they've already been paying more tax each year as their wage crept up. And if Reeves extends that freeze to 2030, it's due to end in 2028, and I'm pretty sure she will, analysis has shown that the same 50k earner would hand over an extra £1,248 to the Treasury across those 2 additional years. That's roughly 50 quid vanishing from their pay packet every single month with no change to the tax rate, which is exactly why I think extending the freeze to the tax threshold is so likely. It doesn't technically break Labour's pledge, so Reeves can claim she kept her promise, all while quietly raking in billions more from working people. But fiscal drag isn't the only way she'll reach into your wallet. If you're a parent, there's the high income child benefit charge, and if you're a driver, fuel duty is back on the table. So for parents, HICBC is pretty brutal. There's really no other way to describe it. It used to kick in at 50 grand, right? And Jeremy Hunt actually raised it to 60 in 2024, which does sound good, except that 60k is now frozen. So thanks to fiscal drag, more and more families are being pulled into it every year. So at the start of the video, I mentioned a single earner family being punished. Well, that's partly thanks to HICBC, because if they're earning 65k with 2 kids, they'll lose about £560 a year in benefit charges. And Reeves doesn't even need to change the rules. Just by freezing that threshold, she quietly pulls in another £500 million for the Treasury, all paid for by middle-class working families. But don't worry, Labour won't raise taxes on working people. Just people that literally have to work to feed their families. But it's not just parents that will feel the squeeze. Anyone who drives, commutes, or anyone who gets groceries delivered is about to feel it too. Because fuel duty is another lever Reeves may pull. It's a tax built into every litre of petrol and diesel, and right now it's about 53p a litre. And for more than a decade, it has been frozen. Plus, and thanks to Rishi Sunak, we've had a temporary 5p cut. That move alone costs the Treasury about £2 billion every year. Now, Reeves has a few options here. She can extend the fuel duty freeze, which she'll likely do. She could scrap Sunak's cut, which the RAC says would add around £3.50 to filling up your car. Or the very unpopular option, unfreeze fuel duty entirely, so it rises with inflation. That would raise billions, but also send pump prices through the roof and probably spark a riot or two. Honestly though, I'm not against the idea of removing Sunak's cut. I drive, so I'd notice it, but plenty of people don't drive or at all, and they're still having to pay for it. And that £2 billion could be used, annoyingly, to just plug the black hole or improve the country instead of just subsidizing fuel. And studies show that it's regressive, so wealthier drivers with bigger cars save about £60, while lower earners save something like 22 quid. So this 5p cut actually helps those on the top while spreading the cost across everyone else. Now, do I think Reeves would even dare scrap the 5p cut? Probably not, given that she's about as popular as a fart in an elevator. But if she leaves fuel alone, then she's going to have to look somewhere else. And that means our savings, because these are pots that she can raid quietly without triggering the kind of backlash fuel duty would cause. So pensions cost the Treasury more than £40 billion a year in tax-free relief. So as you can imagine, cutting them back it's a pretty talked about option, not just in the press, but here on YouTube. And you can already see the panic. The FT reported that £18 billion has been withdrawn from pensions in the last year, so people are rushing to lock in their tax-free cash before the rules potentially change. People are scared that the government is coming for their money, and I think they have good reason to be, because it's not just pension tax relief that's being discussed. The tax-free lump sum, ISA limits, and even tweaks to inheritance tax are all on the table. So right now, when you hit 55, you can take 25% of your pension tax-free, or up to a cap of about $268,000. But Reeves's pension minister, a guy called Torsten Bell, has called this very generous, very regressive, and a strange incentive. And this guy Bell has talked a lot about pension reforms throughout his career, and now he's finally in a position where he can actually do something about them. And that's why I think this is so likely. Now, there are two rumoured options. One is a flat £40,000 cap on the tax-free pension lump sum, which Bell actually floated already back in 2019. And then there's a softer option of lowering the cap to 200,000 or maybe 100,000, which the government did consider last year. But at 200k, the impact is smaller, most won't be touched. It would mainly hit high earners, so Reeves can just tell us that she isn't taxing working people while still raising £1 to £2 billion a year. Pension tax relief is another big one, and I also think this is likely. So right now it's tied to your tax band. So if you're a higher rate taxpayer, every £100 you put into your pension only costs 60 because the government lets you put that money in without its 40% cut. But if Reeves switches this to a flat rate, let's say 25 or 30%, then it flips. Higher earners lose out, while basic rate taxpayers would actually gain. And the IFS estimates that capping pension relief, i.e. removing the 40 and 45% benefit, could raise about $15 billion a year. And the Resolution Foundation, a place where our pension minister Torsten Bell used to work, have said that reforms to pensions could be part of a package to raise over $20 billion in new revenue. And for Reeves, again, this is an easy sell. She can frame it as fair, she can say it protects working people, and she technically doesn't break Labour's pledge. But that's your retirement fund. The next target, I think, is arguably worse because it's the cash you can actually touch. Your ISA. So Reeves has already committed to not slash the overall 20k allowance, but instead to cut the cash part, with some saying it will go down to 10k and others as low as £4,000. And there is some logic to this. Basically, too much money is sitting in cash ISAs instead of being invested, and we can see this through HMRC's data that shows something like 8 million people hold cash ISAs, and that's compared with about 3.8 in stocks and shares. And on average, savers only put £4,300 a year into cash ISAs, which is obviously way below the 20k limit. Reeves has also dropped a few hints.
For too long, we have presented investment in too negative a light, quick to warn people of the risks without giving proper weight to the benefits. And our tangled system of financial advice and guidance has meant people cannot get the right support to make the right decisions for themselves.
And Reuters reports that she wants to get more savers into stocks, which I don't think is a bad idea, but there's a slight problem with this, okay? People aren't just going to turn into investors overnight because most are scared of the risk, and I mean, can you blame them? The headlines are screaming that the AI bubble's about to burst and the markets could crash at any moment and the UK is going bankrupt. So with news like that, is the general public really going to rush into equities and investments? And what I think will actually happen is the opposite. People will hoard what they have, treat it as like an emergency fund, and just end up paying more tax on the interest. So if Reeves does cut our cash ISA allowance, you can either see it as a smart policy to encourage investing or just a quiet way of shrinking the tax-free shelter. And either way, they still get your money. Keep it in cash and you pay more tax on interest, or move it into investments and they'll just find another way to tax your gains later, like when you die. Inheritance tax is a bit of a paradox. So poll after poll shows most people want it scrapped, even though only about 4 to 5% of estates actually pay it. And politicians know it's unpopular. Back in 2007, George Osborne shot the Tories up in the polls by promising to raise the threshold to £1 million, and good old Liz Truss recently even floated abolishing it completely. But if you get rid of it, then you'll need to replace it with something else, which is where a wealth tax could come in. And this is similar because it targets accumulated assets, except when you're alive and not dead. Reeves, though, in all her wisdom, has already dismissed the idea of a wealth tax as being unproven, which is really quite a reason, because Norway, Switzerland and Spain have had them for years. But instead, she's choosing a much safer route. she's just going to fiddle with inheritance tax. In last year's budget, she capped reliefs on farmland and business property, which we all know how well that went down. Of course, the farmers were pissed off and they've been protesting, but that really hasn't made Reeves budge, because this reform is ultimately expected to raise an extra £2 to £4 billion each year. And it's for that reason that I think she might take this further and go after something known as lifetime gifts. So at the moment, if you had an asset to your kids and survived 7 years, they escape tax entirely. But what's being floated is either scrapping that or putting a lifetime cap on how much we can ever give away tax-free. And as much as I think this is ridiculous and it would be deeply unpopular, I think she'd do it because it would raise another billion and push their total tax grab of inheritance to like 10 to 12 billion. And ultimately, they can spin this again as what it will be. It'll be, we're protecting working people. I can see it now. She's going to say, we're scrapping lifetime gifts to protect working people and close the loopholes that wealthy families use to hand down money, right? Can't you just imagine she's going to say it like that? It's going to be like, closing loopholes to protect working people. Oh, telling us how much money we can gift tax-free across our lifetime. Putting a limit on that. What a ridiculous idea. Anyway, what's next? So in April this year, the stamp duty relief expired, and the impact was brutal. The tax-free threshold for buyers dropped, while first-time buyers saw their relief cut from $425,000 to $300,000, meaning someone buying a home for, let's say, £500,000, a pretty average starter price these days in London or the southeast of England, would have seen their stamp duty rise from £3,750 to £10,000. And just like we saw with pensions, this triggered a wave of panic. Mortgage completions surged by 60% in the first 3 months of the year before the demand completely collapsed. Now that's another example where Labour have spooked people into rushing their financial decisions, which is the opposite of what a budget is supposed to achieve. It should create stability, but instead it's having the opposite effect and creating instability. And if Reeves was willing to let stamp duty relief expire and she netted about £2.5 billion by doing that, what's stopping her from going further? According to The Guardian, she's already considering a tax on the sale of homes. So when you sell your home, if it's worth more than $500,000, you might pay tax. And she's also considering the removal of capital gains tax exemption on main residents above £1.5 million. That would be a major shift, because right now you don't pay capital gains when you sell your own home, only on second homes or investment properties, which I think makes sense. But on your main house, come on. And it doesn't stop there. The IFS has even modelled what would happen if we aligned capital gains with income tax. This is also something Gary Stevenson recently mentioned.
Tax exemptions, especially on things like inheritance tax exemptions, you get situations where the richest people pay nothing by putting money into trusts.
And what that means is if you're a higher rate taxpayer, instead of paying 28% CGT, which already takes the piss, we could be looking at paying 40 or even 45% capital gains. Honestly, at this point, you start wondering what message this sends, because people are just going to stop. They're going to stop buying and selling and investing or moving homes, because what's the point if every step you try to take forward, you're met with another tax bill? And surprise, surprise, Zoopla has already warned that even floating these types of tax ideas will scare people into walking away from deals or just waiting to move, which will continue to just mess with the housing market. This is pretty bleak, isn't it? Because instead of creating stability, which should be the role of government, they're just creating more and more fear. And instead of people being ambitious and trying to grow their wealth, you just end up with paralysis or a stagnant nation, which is pretty much what we have today. So will we actually see one of these property tax changes in the budget? Honestly, you just don't know with this government. Taxing sales on your main home feels like a step too far. Aligning capital gains with income tax, well, like Gary said, that could be likely. It would net a few extra billion, and again, Reeves could frame it as not taxing working people. Now, I hope she doesn't use every option we've discussed today, but I think there's two directions that she'll go. One, she just goes wild. You know, I'm talking spring break, Mexico, Cancun. She taxes primary residences, aligns capital gains fully with income tax, goes after pension relief and the tax-free lump sum, reduces ISA allowances, and even cuts Sunak's 5p fuel duty cut. All of these ideas have been modelled or discussed, and it would get them out of this black hole, raise billions, and they could pretty much say that they're not raising taxes on working people. Yay. But some of these are just too radical, and they'd require years to implement, and almost certainly another Labour term, which right now feels about as likely as Keir Starmer not mentioning that his dad was a toolmaker.
My dad was a toolmaker. My dad was a toolmaker. Dad was a toolmaker. My dad was a toolmaker. Toolmaker.
So instead of one big dramatic announcement, Reeves is far more likely to deliver a series of small blows, like small stealth taxes that will just add up to the biggest tax raid Britain has ever seen. Pension tax relief will move to a flat rate. There'll be some alignment of capital gains with income tax. ISA allowances will be cut, probably for cash, and of course the freeze on income tax and national insurance will just be dragged out to 2030. Altogether, this could quietly raise 15 to 20 billion pounds, and Reeves can frame it as not raising taxes on working people, while reassuring the markets that she's being responsible so she can avoid triggering another bond market meltdown. And that's the real story here. There probably won't be the headline-grabbing reforms that arguably this country needs. Instead, it will be the small, sneaky stealth tweaks that will quietly shift thousands more from our pockets back to the Treasury. So what can we do about it? Well, cool, really. I'm joking. Kind of. Unfortunately, though, none of us can really predict exactly what Reeves will do, but we can prepare for the most likely outcome. So, go and check where you stand on key thresholds like £50,270 for higher rate tax or £60,000 for child benefit clawbacks, because even a modest pay rise or dividend could tip you over. And if you're close, then it might be worth looking at pension contributions or salary sacrifice to stay under the line. Second, use the generous allowances we still have. The £20,000 ISA limit and 25% pension lump sum are both in the crosshairs. Using them now could save you thousands if Reeves cuts them back in November. Third, and this one's nice and simple, check your tax code. Fiscal drag is a pain in the ass, and it's pulling millions of people into tax situations that HMRC literally can't keep up with. So there's a chance you could be on the wrong code. So dig out your payslip, find your code. It'll probably be 1257L, and use the government's online checker to see if it's correct. And finally, if you're sitting on profits from investments outside an ISA, like shares or a second property, then be tactical. I'm not suggesting selling, and this isn't financial advice, but Reeves is eyeing up capital gains. So you could consider selling some of your assets before the budget to make sure that you've used your annual £3,000 tax-free allowance. And for couples, you can also gift assets to your lower earning spouse so they can actually use their allowance and lower tax band. That's a really simple, legal way to double the protection for your household. And most importantly, try not to panic.
Don't panic! Don't panic!
I know it's pretty bleak right now, so just try to stay informed. Sources like Martin Lewis and the IFS are good places to go, and I'll continue to break things down on this channel. I think we should definitely do an autumn budget recap. It'll be interesting to see what madness she actually unleashes and how right or wrong I was. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see that, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.